I was 18 and backpacking in the Ozarks with my grandma and mom. We had been walking for the entire day, like you do when backpacking, and were trying to find a place to set up the camp for the night. An important thing to mention is that the Ozark Trail is dead in the middle of the wilderness. There is no people there. You are completely alone, and you very rarely hear any signs of life. It's just you and the empty woods. We had no means of defending ourselves, because when you go backpacking, you want to bring the bare minimum. You have to carry essentials, such as food, clothing, medical supplies, toiletries, tents, sleeping bags, etc. You want to make sure all these things are as light as possible because you have to carry it all by yourself for several days. So, something like a gun is too heavy to bring. We certainly wished we had a gun on that night though. It had been raining, so the rivers had ridden up. This made it quite hard for us to get to a good place to set up camp. You see, we had printed out several maps of the trail and they showed where good places to camp were. The only camp spot that was close was across a river that was way too deep and fast-flowing to safely cross with our backpacks. In fact, the river had risen enough that we weren't even sure if the place we were looking for was still there or not. We naturally tried to find somewhere else to sleep. We ended up walking much farther ahead and still couldn't find a good place. We eventually had to stop when I couldn't walk any further because my legs hurt too badly and it was getting dark. Finally, we set up camp in a hollow dip between two hills, which was a big mistake. Funny thing about hollows is that they're creepy as hell. All the plants that grew there were sickly looking. Mostly leafless and thin, just pale sticks jutting from the ground at varying angles. There was such a high density of the creepy plants or small trees that you couldn't see very far away either. A thick tarp of rotting and crispy leaves covered the ground, up to my ankles. With every step I took through them, I felt paranoid thinking that a copperhead would bite me. Sound can carry far in hollows, so you can't easily tell how close or far away something is. And the feeling that something was boring its eyes into our backs couldn't be shook. Suffice to say, going off to use the bathroom in these conditions was not ideal at all. We had to rip some of the gangly sticks out of the ground to make room for our tents, and by the time we were done setting everything up, it was dark. After eating dinner, we retired to our tent. Our tent was a two-person tent, but all three of us squeezed in there, because none of us had the gut to sleep in the one-person tent. We would always talk and joke around, while I stretched before going to sleep. This night was no different, and before we knew it, we were all laughing pretty hard. Suddenly my mom and grandma stopped dead in their tracks and told me to turn on the flashlight we had hanging from the tent roof. They were listening to something carefully in a way that immediately put me on edge. I asked them what was going on because I couldn't hear anything. They said they could hear what sounded like a man screaming, as if he was being tortured horribly. We were as silent as possible for a long time. At first, I thought they must be joking with me because I couldn't hear anything. It was obvious that they were listening for something though, and deep down, my instincts were telling me that this was a sketchy situation. I was so still that I'm pretty sure my heartbeat slowed down. After a while we decided to try and sleep. What else were we supposed to do? It's not like there was any cell service. And even if there was, help wouldn't arrive for a long time, seeing as how we were in the wild. None of us slept well, despite the screaming having stopped. I kept waking up at the smallest noises, which were usually just my mom or grandma making slight sounds in their sleep. At one point, there was the sound of something moving outside the tent. In my heightened state of awareness, I sensed that it was just raccoons. This was later confirmed in the next morning, when my grandma said she thought she heard raccoons trying to get to our food, which had been hung up in a tree. This was one of the longest nights of my life. It seemed like it would never end until it finally did. When I opened my restless eyes to find that the sun had actually rose, I was flooded with relief. We got ready for the day's hike, packed up our stuff, and got out of there. The rest of our nights weren't so bad. When the end of the week came, my mom's cousin picked us up from a public campsite we made to. We told him about the freaky night in the hollow. He thought what we heard could have been a mountain lion, as they can sound like a person screaming. I looked up a YouTube video of mountain lion sounds when we got to a place with internet. My mom and grandma said that could have been it. By the way they sound, I can easily see how they could be mistaken for a human, screaming in agony from a distance. As for why I couldn't hear the mountain lion, I'm not entirely sure. I suspect that I can't hear certain animals from far away, because I discovered that, apparently the neighborhood dogs bark at night. And I only found this out when my parents were complaining about them, and saying they were annoying. I can't hear them barking. I don't seem to have any other problems hearing though, so I'm not sure.